Hello and welcome back to our course on web design, and today we'll continue from where we stopped on development terms. All right, so the first term we'll be looking at today is debugging. All right, so now debugging is a process. If you remember from our last class, we talked about a bug, right? And we said a bug is simply an error, okay, that stops our code from hurting with the desired output. All right, so now debugging is the process by which we solve these errors. So the process of identifying and solving bugs in our codes is what we call debugging. All right, the next one is domain name. All right, now if you could remember, we talked about going to the browser and typing out the word facebook.com, right? So if you type out facebook.com on your uh, browser, it takes you to the website Facebook. Okay, now the thing that goes on in the background to take you to the website is what you don't actually know. But the truth is that there are so many things that goes on under the curtain that you wouldn't know uh, uh, in the process of redirecting you from or moving you from your browser window or your home browser to the Facebook website. All right, so but that piece of word that you typed with that extension .com is what we call your domain name. All right, so it is the address of your website or of any website over the www, that's the World Wide Web. Now the DNS stands for domain name system. So we've talked about the domain name. Now we want to talk about the domain name system, right? So just like I've said, there are so many things that goes on behind the curtain to get you to the website, right? So every website on the internet sits on a particular server, all right? And those server that your website sits on has an IP address, all right? So now what happens is this: the DNS is like the phone book of the website of the World Wide Web. All right, it's just like the phone book of the internet. So when we type in lmssmarthub.com, all right, the World Wide Web tries to uh, search through its phone book. All right, so it just tries to resolve that name to the particular IP address that is linked to the name. So it searches through its own home phone book, the same way you go through the phone book on your phone and you are looking for a particular person to call. So when you pick a name or when you get a name of the person you want to contact, you are able to recognize it because it is very much readable and you can easily remember whose name it is. Assuming that there was no option or maybe no provision for saving people's number with their name, see that when you want to call someone, you mix up the numbers, because if what is left there is just the number, you will hardly know who you want to call. All right, so that's the same way it is on the website. Every website sitting on any particular server, every server that a website is sitting on has an IP address. So we now use the domain name system to resolve the domain name you already know of that website to the IP address of the server where it is sitting on. So you cannot have or cram up the IP address of all the sites that you've come across. So the easiest thing or the easiest way to be able to access these contents is to know their domain name. So the DNS is like the phone book of the internet that houses these IP addresses, and that helps us to resolve the domain name to their different IP addresses when we search for particular websites on the internet. Then favicon, or some might call it favicon. You would hear favicon, you'd hear favicon, but it stands for favorite icon. All right, so this is basically the icon that appears on the top left tab of your browser. All right, so if you open a website on your browser, it's on the tab of that particular page that you've opened, on the top left part of that tab, you see an icon. All right, so that icon you see there is what we call a favicon or a favorite icon. All right, so let's proceed. The next term we are going to talk about is the hosting. All right, hosting. Now, what is a host? All right, a host actually refers to a web server or a server where the contents or the files of your website sits on. So the server where the contents of your files are stored is what we call a web server, or it's what we call a host. Sorry, right? The server where the contents of your files are stored. So they are the host. It's what we call the host. So that's where uh, uh, that's the point that serves users the request. So when a user requests to visit your site, so it is this host, all right. It is this host that serves the content to the particular user. So it is basically a web server. So when we talk about a host, we are talking about a web server where your files are stored. All right. So you could hear a web server or you could hear a host. Either way, they mean the same thing. All right. So your a hosting platform, whatever you hear or you get to see out there, they're just basically the same thing. So and what they do is to hold or store your web contents and files.